1922, a hemlock ridge above the Pigeon River. In the hills of western North Carolina, a man named Corbett Sluter had been up there 11 days. He'd buried his brother-in-law the previous winter, then lost the mule in April, and by June he was guiding timber crews through country no road touched. He had in his coat pocket a folded paper with 14 items written on it, his entire supply list. 3 pounds of cornmeal, a half pound of salt pork, a folding knife, matches in a corked bottle, $14.31 to his name, 11 days out. No tent, not once cold. Today, the average American family spends over $400 outfitting 2 people for a single weekend in the woods. Gore-Tex, titanium, a sleeping bag, rated to temperatures they will never encounter. And most of them are still cold by midnight. But here's the twist. The record says Corbett Sluter was not cold. The record says the man slept dry 3 nights during a hard rain, cooked every meal hot, and walked out on his own 2 feet at the end of the 11 days with cornmeal to spare. What he knew has a name, not 1 name, but 25 of them. 25 skills those families carried in their heads the way you carry your phone number. Skills that kept a man alive in the hills with $14 in his pocket and nothing between him and the weather but what he'd learned. That's sovereign knowledge, friend. Nobody bills you for it. Nobody can take it back. My name is Wade Tolliver. I'm 58 years old, 6th generation at Tolliver Gap, up on the Cumberland Plateau in eastern Kentucky. My family climbed to that ridge in 1788 and never once came back down for good. My grandfather, Emmett Tolliver, kept a ledger from 1931 to 1979. Black cover, cloth spine. The front pages are household accounts. What he paid for feed, what the mine paid him per ton. The back pages and the margins are something else entirely. That's where he wrote how things were done. Every method, every season, every measure. He made me swear that what was in those margins wouldn't die with him. Every one of these videos is me keeping that word. And I'll tell you this, there are 40 years of margins still in that book I haven't opened on camera yet. We are nowhere close to done. Before we count down, I want to flag 2 things. Number 14 on this list is one that the state extension services started quietly walking back in the 1960s, and recent Department of Agriculture guidance has looped back around to confirm the original method holds up on its own terms. And number 3 produces a thermal effect that modern insulation manufacturers have spent 50 years trying to replicate in synthetic fill, and still price that fill at $60 to $90 a pound. Keep those 2 in mind as we go. Now, the first pattern break, friend. Before we get into the count, I want you to understand something. The first half of this list is skills most people have simply forgotten. Useful, worth knowing, good to have. But from number 13 downward, we cross into territory where somebody made money the day you forgot. Those are different. Pay attention when we get there. Number 25, reading the sky before the clouds close in. 1936, the Ouachita Hills of western Arkansas. The old-timers there could call rain 6 hours out by the color of the western horizon and the behavior of the chimney smoke. Not guess, call. The method: a yellowed sky at 3 in the afternoon means water before dark. Smoke that hangs flat and drifts south means a pressure drop is coming. The Department of Agriculture's own weather extension bulletins from that era were teaching farm families these exact indicators because the nearest barometer was 40 miles away. The skill died when the radio weather report became standard in rural homes roughly 1952 onward. Nobody sold you anything to kill it. It just stopped being passed on. The failure today is looking at the phone instead of the sky, and the phone has been wrong on backcountry timing more times than anyone wants to count. Number 24, building a fire lay that catches once and stays. Kentucky coal country, 1928. Every man going into the backcountry built his fire lay before he needed it. Tinder in the center, no bigger than a closed fist, kindling cross hatched over it in 2 layers. Few would set at an angle to let air pull through the bottom. One match. If it needed a second match, you'd done it wrong. The USDA Farmers' Bulletins from the early 1900s described this geometry in precise terms because wet weather fire failure cost lives and crops. The skill eroded when lighters became cheap and fire starters became a retail category somewhere around 1968. The failure today is stacking wood too tight and strangling the draw before the kindling catches. Number 23. Knowing which wood burns hot and which burns long. Appalachian timber camps, 1915. The cook knew before he split a stick whether it would build heat fast or hold coals through the night. Hickory and oak for a long cook, poplar to start fast and burn out, pine for a quick flame that doesn't last an hour. This is not intuition. It's the grain, the density, the weight in your hand when dry. The Army field manuals taught recruits the same table. It left common knowledge when central heating removed the daily feedback loop. The man who stacks soft poplar expecting overnight coals is the one who wakes up at 2 in the morning to a dead fire and 40 degrees in the tent. Number 22. The debris shelter. A logging camp in the hill country of southern Ohio, 1911. A man named Alfred Trent built a sleeping shelter in under an hour, using nothing but what the forest floor offered. A ridgepole wedged between two forks, ribs of branch laid at 45 degrees on both sides, 2 feet of leaf litter packed over the top and sides. He slept in temperatures that dropped to 26 degrees without a blanket. The insulating depth required is roughly the length of your arm from fingertip to shoulder, packed tight, no gaps at the foot end. The National Park Service still includes this in its wilderness survival curriculum. It disappeared from public knowledge when the 2-person dome tent hit mass retail around 1974. The failure today is building the walls too thin at the foot and letting the cold draft find you at the ankles. Number 21. Rendering fat in the field for fuel and food. Eastern Tennessee Hill Country, 1930. A hunting party would render bear fat or pork fat in a tin cup over coals. Slow heat, skim the solids, pour into a sealed container before it cooled. That fat was cooking grease, waterproofing for boots, and emergency fuel for a rag lamp, all in one. The Army of the Potomac's field supply records from the Civil War period show rendered lard listed as a standard issue item. The practice was commercially displaced when petroleum-based lubricants and refined vegetable shortening became cheaper to ship than to carry raw materials for, roughly by the 1940s. The failure today is letting the heat climb too fast, which chars the solids and ruins both the flavor and the burn quality. Here's your first task this week, neighbor. Next time you cook bacon or salt pork, pour the fat into a clean jar instead of the drain. Let it cool. Put a lid on it. You now have the beginning of a field-capable supply that cost you nothing and would have made Corbett Sluter nod. Number 20. Wet weather fire with a friction start. Ozark Hill Country of southern Missouri, 1923. Wet conditions meant a bow drill, dry inner bark of cedar or cottonwood shredded fine, and a notched fireboard kept inside the bedroll to stay dry. The friction method requires a specific downward pressure, not speed. About 2 pounds of steady downward force against a spindle, consistent stroke, and a spindle of straight-grained dry wood no wider than your thumb. The method is documented in military survival manuals going back to World War I. It left general knowledge when the waterproof match was mass-produced and sold in camping supply catalogs by the early 1950s. The failure today is using a spindle with green wood or uneven grain, which creates friction without heat. Number 19. Finding and purifying water without a filter. A trapping camp in the hill country of northern Georgia, 1917. The rule then was simple and specific: moving water over rock, not over soil, a seep from a mossy sandstone face higher than the trail, water collected from the inside of a leaf funnel built above the ground. Boiling was the standard, and the standard was a full rolling boil for no less than 1 minute, longer at elevation. The state extension services in Appalachia were teaching this through the 1940s. The retail water filter became a camping essential around 1985, and a decent one runs $40 to $80 today. A clean tin cup and a fire costs you nothing. And I'll say this plainly. If you are filtering water in a backcountry emergency, always boil after filtering when you can. Don't trust any single method alone. Number 18, cold weather camp bedding from natural materials. A survey crew camp on the plateau above Hazard in eastern Kentucky, 1931. The crew used dry leaves packed inside a canvas sack for a sleeping pad, not a pillow, a pad. 6 inches of packed dry oak leaf under the body stops more cold transfer from the ground than most foam pads sold today, because ground cold kills faster than air cold. Emmett wrote that in the margin in his own hand. The technique was standard in military field manuals through the Second World War and dropped from recruit training when synthetic sleeping pads became standard issue in the 1960s. The failure today is using the leaves as a cover rather than as a ground barrier, which is the less important of the two applications. Number 17, reading water depth and current before crossing. A ford crossing on a creek in the hill country of Western Virginia, 1925. The rule: never cross moving water above the knee in current you cannot see bottom through. Throw a stick in first and watch how it moves. If it spins, there's a hole underneath. A stick that drifts clean and slow means a flat bottom. This was taught in Boy Scout field manuals from the 1910 edition onward and in Army field movement doctrine for decades. It left civilian common knowledge when vehicle crossings and bridges replaced foot fords. The man who steps into spinning water thinking it's shallow is the one the current takes. Now the second pattern break, friend. We are past the halfway mark, and I want to be straight with you. Everything from here down is a skill that someone made a point of replacing with a product, not a conspiracy. Just commerce, but the replacement costs you money, and the original costs you knowledge, and knowledge compounds in ways that dollars don't. That is what this channel is about. Number 16, night navigation by star and terrain. A droving trail through the hill country of East Tennessee, 1914. A man moving cattle at night used 3 fixed stars and 1 ridgeline, not a star map. 3 stars that he knew the position of at 11 at night in October, and the silhouette of a ridge he'd crossed 100 times. The method requires learning the positions of 3 known stars relative to north over 2 or 3 clear nights before you need them. The Army taught stellar navigation to infantry officers through the 1960s. It was removed from standard field training as GPS receivers became standard issue. A dead phone battery in a hollow at midnight is not a situation where this feels like history. Number 15, controlling heat with coal management, not flame adjustment. A blacksmith's field camp in the hill country of central Kentucky, 1929. The skill is banking coals, spreading them wide for a lower sustained heat, piling them center and deep for a concentrated blast. It's the coal you manage, not the fire itself. Every farm cook who used a wood stove understood this by necessity. The technique is documented in domestic economy, publications from the land-grant universities going back to the 1890s. It became irrelevant when gas burners offered dial control somewhere in the early 1950s. The failure today is adding wood to raise heat instead of rearranging what is already burning, which wastes fuel and overshoots the target temperature. Number 14, the coal-heated sleeping stone. And here is where I told you to pay attention. The state extension services were quietly stepping back from this one, starting in the early 1960s, when electric blankets became affordable and the method looked primitive. The method: a flat sandstone or slate rock, no smaller than 12 inches across and no thicker than 2 inches, heated slowly beside the fire for no less than 45 minutes, wrapped in a wool cloth or grain sack, and placed at the foot of the bedroll before you get in. The rock holds usable warmth for 4 to 6 hours. The key word is sandstone or slate. Never granite, never river, rounded quartz. Stones with trapped moisture can fracture under heat and throw fragments. You heat slowly and you check for any sound of cracking before you wrap. Done right, this is a safe, effective, Zero-cost heat source that needs no battery, no fuel canister, and no cord. Department of Agriculture guidance on rural winter survival from the 1940s still documents it. The electric blanket industry did not lobby against the sleeping stone. They just made their product cheap enough that nobody bothered to teach the old way anymore. Number 13. The wicking fire and its uses. A timber camp in the Monongahela country of West Virginia, 1919. A wicking fire is built vertical instead of horizontal. A column of upright sticks lean together at the top, dry bark at the center bottom, ignited from below. It burns top down, slow, and nearly smokeless after the first 5 minutes. It was used to stay invisible and to conserve wood on long watches. The technique appears in Army infantry field manuals from the First World War era. It has no commercial replacement. It simply stopped being taught when camping became a leisure industry rather than a life skill, roughly through the 1960s. The failure is using green outer bark instead of dry inner bark at the base, which produces smoke and no heat. Number 12. Wound cleaning without antiseptic solution. I'll say this clearly before I say anything else. This is history. If you have access to medical care or proper antiseptic, use it. What follows is what men used when they had no other option, and it belongs in this list because it is part of the record. A mining camp in the hill country of southeastern Kentucky, 1926. The standard field method for a cut that needed cleaning was clean water, boiled and cooled with as much mechanical flushing as the wound could take. Not dabbing, flushing under pressure from a squeezed cloth. Civil War field surgery records document this as the primary method before antiseptic solutions were available. What replaced it was the retail antiseptic market built around iodine and carbolic compounds sold in drugstores from the early 1900s onward. Boil water costs nothing. Know the method because the day you need it, you probably won't have the bottle. Number 11. Reading animal behavior for weather change. A farmstead at the edge of the Daniel Boone country of eastern Kentucky, 1933. The cattle moved to low ground 8 hours before a hard freeze. The horses turned their backs to the north before the wind shifted. These were not old wives' tales. They were observations confirmed consistent enough that farm families timed their own preparations by them. Farmers' Almanac columns from the early 1900s documented the behavioral indicators as practical forecasting tools. The skill was rendered unnecessary by radio forecasting and later by satellite weather services. The failure today is dismissing it entirely when, in a backcountry situation with no signal, the deer moving fast and low at midday is telling you something. Here's your second task this week, neighbor. Tonight, if you have animals, or if you see birds or deer near your property, watch the direction they face and the altitude they hold. Write it down. Check the weather the next morning. Do this for 2 weeks. You'll start to see what Emmett saw. Number 10. Cordage from plant fiber. A homestead in the hill country of western North Carolina, 1921. Inner bark of basswood, twisted in opposite directions between the palms. One strand twisted clockwise, a second strand twisted clockwise, then the two wound together counterclockwise. The result holds weight in the range of 30 to 40 pounds for a strand no thicker than a pencil. This method appears in both Army field manuals and the early Boy Scout handbooks. It was replaced by nylon cordage, sold in hardware stores, a product that became cheaply available to rural consumers by the early 1960s. The failure today is twisting both strands in the same direction, which causes them to unwind under load instead of locking. Number 9. Signaling without electronics. A lost hunting party in the hill country of northern Alabama, 1938. 3 members used a signal mirror made from a tin plate burnished smooth, a flash visible over 5 miles in direct sun, aimed by watching the reflection of the sun hit a sighting point made from the fingers. The method is documented in Army field survival training from the Second World War onward. It was commercially replaced by personal locator beacons and satellite communicators, which run between $250 and $400 retail. A polished tin plate costs nothing. The failure today is not knowing the aiming method, which turns a useful tool into a random flash. Number 8. Finding edible plants by elimination, not by name. And here I want to be plain with you. I am not going to give you a list of plants and tell you what to eat. That is not how this works. And anyone who tells you it does work that way is going to get someone hurt. The skill the old-timers had was not memorizing names. It was a system of elimination taught over years, plant by plant, with someone who already knew. Emmett learned it from his mother learned it from hers. The record in those margins is a list of individual plants with notes, not a shortcut. The skill cannot be transmitted in a video. What I can tell you is this: the system existed, it was rigorous, and the families who had it could identify and use over 40 local plant species with confidence. The state extension services in Appalachia documented these systems through the 1940s. They stopped publishing that guidance when supermarket access reached rural counties in the post-war years. Nobody made money killing this one. The grocery store just made it feel unnecessary. Number 7. Sleeping position and shelter orientation for warmth retention. A trail camp in the mountains above the Powell River Valley in southwestern Virginia, 1929. The rule: door faces east, away from the prevailing west wind, body positioned with feet toward the fire, head away, shoulders curl slightly forward, not flat on the back, which opens the chest to convective heat loss. These specifics show up in military cold weather field manuals. They were made irrelevant by the sleeping bag, which manages body heat without requiring positional awareness. The sleeping bag as a consumer product took hold in the camping market through the 1950s. The failure today is sleeping flat on the back in a cold shelter and wondering why the bag isn't enough. Number 6. Treating and preserving leather in the field. A freighting camp in the hill country of eastern Tennessee, 1924, rendered fat, worked into boot leather while still warm and dry, pushed into the seams with a thumb, not the surface. The seams, that's where water enters and where the leather cracks. An ounce of fat per boot every 3 or 4 days of hard use. This method kept footwear functional for years. The Army's supply doctrine referenced this practice through the Korean War era. It was displaced when synthetic boot treatments became a retail product, and leather boots themselves were largely replaced by synthetic uppers in the outdoor market, roughly through the 1980s. The failure today is coating the surface and leaving the seams dry. Number 5. Smoke preservation of meat and fish. Now we are getting close to the ground where somebody definitely made money, friend. But I want to say this clearly before I say anything else. Smoking meat for preservation without proper temperature control and salt preparation carries real risk of foodborne illness. What follows is the historical method. If you intend to practice it, get current USDA guidance on safe smoking temperatures and cure ratios first. That guidance is free, it is online, and it is specific. Do not skip it. A camp on the Cumberland River above Burnside in southern Kentucky, 1918. A smoke rack built from green hardwood, positioned 4 feet above a low hickory fire. The meat, already salted, at a ratio of 1 pound of coarse salt to every 8 pounds of meat, hung for no less than 48 hours of continuous smoke at a temperature held between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The USDA was publishing guidance on home smoking and curing through the 1940s. That guidance was quietly reduced as commercial refrigeration reached rural counties and as the retail meat industry consolidated after the Second World War. Nobody wrote a law against your smoke rack, they just built a supply chain that made it feel like something you didn't need to know. Not a conspiracy, neighbor. That is exactly how markets work. There was no dollar in you knowing how to smoke your own meat, and there were plenty of dollars in you buying theirs. Number 4, camp sanitation and latrine discipline. A survey camp in the hill country of northern Georgia, 1930. 6 men, 42 days, no illness. The method was categorical. latrine dug no less than 200 feet from the water source and downhill from it, no less than 8 inches deep, covered with a shovel of soil after every use, filled and marked before breaking camp. This is not folk wisdom. This is the doctrine the Army Corps of Engineers was teaching to field units from the Spanish-American War onward. It was rendered unnecessary when modern campgrounds built facilities, which is a genuine improvement. What replaced it for backcountry use is the retail waste disposal kit, which runs $8 to $15 per trip. A folding shovel costs $12 once. The failure today is a man who digs shallow and close to water and wonders what made him sick on day 3. Number 3, and I told you to remember this one, layered air insulation, the thermal principle that synthetic insulation manufacturers have priced at $60 to $90 a pound, trying to replicate a logging camp in the hill country of western North Carolina in 1912. The men wore 3 layers: a wool union suit against the skin, a loose linen or cotton shirt over that, a heavy wool outer layer on top. The critical element was the middle layer, loose enough to trap a column of still air between the inner and the outer garment. That trapped air is the insulation, not the wool. The air, military cold weather doctrine from the First and Second World Wars was built on this layering principle because it worked without expensive materials. The principle was commercially displaced when the outdoor industry began selling insulation as a product rather than as a configuration. A goose-down vest running $140 does exactly what a loose linen shirt does between a union suit and a wool coat, and it does it because of the trapped air, not because of the down. The failure today is wearing one very expensive layer instead of 3 inexpensive ones, and being colder for it. Number 2, navigating by terrain and watershed. A hunting camp in the hill country of southeastern Kentucky, 1935. The rule that every man in those hills knew: water runs to the hollow, hollows run to the creek, creeks run to the river, and the river runs out. You are never more than a ridge away from a watershed that will walk you to civilization if you follow it downhill and keep it on one side. This is not an approximate principle. It is the geometry of how hills drain, and it does not fail. The Army taught terrain navigation by watershed feature through the Cold War era, removing it from standard infantry training as GPS became universal in the early 2000s. The failure today is the man who runs uphill looking for a view instead of downhill looking for water, and spends 3 days on a ridge that could have been a half-day walkout. And now, friend, we have been building to this one since we started. I've mentioned it twice. Here it is. Number 1, the overnight survival decision tree. A trapper's camp in the high country above the Clinch River in southwestern Virginia, 1929. A man named Hector Blevins went out alone in November. Temperature dropped 30 degrees in 4 hours. He did not panic. He worked a sequence. First question, am I wet? Second, can I be dry in the next 30 minutes with what I have? Third, can I build a fire in this wind? Fourth, do I have shelter, or can I build one before dark? He worked the questions in that order and in no other order. He answered each one before moving to the next. He was home by morning. That decision sequence is the thing underneath all 24 skills above it. It is not a feeling. It is not instinct. It is a trained order of operations that the old-timers ran so many times it became automatic. The Department of Agriculture's Rural Survival Bulletins from the 1940s described variants of this sequence. It left common knowledge when outdoor recreation became a retail category and survival became a product you could buy pre-packaged on a shelf. The failure is not ignorance of any single skill. The failure is not having a sequence at all, so that when the temperature drops 30 degrees in 4 hours, you start with the wrong question and never recover. That is a sovereign skill, neighbor. Nobody bills you for it. Nobody can take it back. I ran through Emmett's version of that sequence myself last November, stood at the edge of my woodlot in 31 degrees, and walked it from question 1 to question 4, knew the answer to each one. That's the first time I've been able to say that. Took me 58 years to earn it, and most of it came from the margins of a black ledger book that almost got thrown out with an old man's things in 1979. Your granddad knew all of this. Somebody just didn't get the chance to hand it down to you. Now it's yours again. Don't let it die on your watch. Tell me in the comments, which of your grandparents knew these hills? Did they carry any of this? Did they have a decision sequence of their own, or a layering method, or a fire lay they swore by? Tell me the one thing you remember them doing that you never learned to do yourself. I read every one, and I'll tell you what, whichever story gets the most comments down there, that's the one I build the next full video around. You pick the direction, I'll bring the margins. Next time we go to 1931, a county in western Kentucky where a family of 7 made it through a winter that killed livestock 3 counties over, using a root cellar method that the Extension Services documented once and never published again, and the year the commercial canning industry made sure rural families stopped needing to know it. One method, one winter, 7 people. We'll get into all of it. Keep what they knew,